Okay, I guess we're recording.
Okay. Well, hello, folks. Thank you for tuning in for part 2, where we cry our eyes out, because that's what we like to do in our spare time. Talking about grief this month, and if you didn't hear last week's episode, we recorded, I think that's how we have it scheduled to go out, right? Mine goes out first? I don't know.
Yeah.
The last recording was me talking about grief with my parents passing. So
Yeah, she was my guest.
Yes, I was the guest speaker. And today the guest speaker is the lovely Leanna, and she is going to talk about grieving the loss of a friend, which is a little bit different kind of grief. There's different griefs that you're going to encounter in life. Some of a parent, some of a child, like Christine, who's also on this month, that talks about that. Some with friends, some, as a child, some as an adult. And Leanna's going to touch on what it's like to lose a friend. Not only lose a friend, but lose a friend to suicide, which is really hard and sadly becoming, I think, more common these days. So we're gonna get into that. So, Leanna, to start us off, I want you to just tell me about your friendship and what it looked like while he was here.
So we're talking about Anthony, or are we talking about Eric?
Eric. We can touch on Anthony too.
Okay. So I just want to caveat, I don't think it was intentional the way he passed.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think it was more of he already had the thought process of not wanting to be here anymore because of his struggles with, addiction. But I don't think unfortunately, the way he passed wasn't intentionally suicide, but it wasn't like preventing his addiction.
Okay. All right. So Eric is a person you've been friends with since childhood, right? Since high school at least, right?
20 years.
Okay. And then Anthony is the father of her daughter.
Yes, which we did an episode with.
Yeah, which we talked with Ella about and kind of touched on that already, so we'll probably not talk too much about that. But
yeah.
So tell me about your friendship with Eric.
So I want to start off first by saying that I have been avoiding this conversation like the plague.
Because grief is hard and it's not fun.
Because I have a weird, uncomfortable relationship with grief. I haven't...
Tell me more.
I don't want to say that I'm unique in any word of the sense, but it's just uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable to feel grief, probably because fortunately, I haven't had anybody significant pass in my lifetime, luckily. I feel very grateful for that I haven't, that it's uncomfortable for me, kind of. And so when I talk about it, I feel like I shouldn't be the person talking about this. I haven't experienced as much as you or him or her, or, so I feel like my insight is inferior. And so it makes me uncomfortable because I'm like, I shouldn't be the one talking about this. I've been very fortunate in my life.
Well, but there are people that are listening, some who have experienced a lot of grief and some who have not experienced as much grief, that will relate more to you than they will to me or to anybody else that's been on here.
Yeah.
So I think you are speaking to those people. So I think you are the perfect person to talk about this.
Yeah. So if you're kind of sitting where I'm sitting, I guess just keep listening. But grief nonetheless is always hard for people. And Eric is kind of the first significant, like I've had people pass in my life, but Eric is probably the one that's hit the hardest.
Why do you think that is? Because you're older and you understand it more, or just
I'm older and he was definitely like a close person in my life. Like he was Uncle Eric, So
how is that different than Ella's dad's passing?
Well, Ella's dad's passing was definitely hard because he was like the person that I created a life with, you know? Like, I think that you have a certain connection with people when you create children with them. It's always going to you're always going to have that connection, whether you stay with them and they're your, like, significant other or not. That connection's always going to be there. And so his was different in a sense that I was grieving for more so for her than I was for myself, because it was her father, you know.
So that was you grieving for your child mostly.
It's like secondary trauma, I guess you could call it.
Got it. Like, your grief was secondary to her grief, and now this one, your friend, is like first degree grief.
Yeah. This is, and there's a lot of things that surround it too, so hopefully we get into that, and if not, I can share. But what was your first question? I'm sorry.
So I just want you to tell me a little bit about what, like, your friendship was like. Like, how was this person important to you?
Oh, God. So 20 years is a lot, so I'm going to do the best I can to summarize it. So I met Eric and my friend Josh, which actually Josh was a episode we launched earlier in January. Yeah, he was a guest, so if you go back and listen to his episode, it's really awesome. But so I met Eric and Josh when I was 15, and I was struggling. So you guys have heard me talk about my issues with substance use, like, really early on. So when I met them, I was, like, in the thick of my addiction. And I'm already crying. And they were, like, kind of that breath of fresh air outside of that addiction, because I didn't have to use around them to, like, hang out with them or be anything. Like, yeah, we partied and smoked pot and stuff like that, you know, normal teenager stuff. So I was able to be a normal teenager with them, aside from the addiction. And they also knew about my addiction. So Eric knew that I was doing these things to my body and didn't judge me for it.
That's already beautiful. A friend who doesn't judge you for the struggles you're going through is precious, because not all your friends are going to be that way. Not all your friends have the capacity to hold that space for you. Especially at an early age.
Yeah, at 16. Like, you're not going to find that.
Yeah.
Whew.
Take your time.
I haven't talked about him in a while. Mind you, this death is really fresh, so yeah. See my discomfort? It's real.
Yeah.
So
grief is real.
So he has been around through college, through marriages and divorces, through different significant others. Like, obviously 20 years is a lot of friendship, you know, a lot of different things. And I've been around with him as well. So I got to see, like, his life and how he progressed and all of that. And he was, like, one of those friendships that, like, you wouldn't see each other for years, and then you would meet back up again, and it was like no time had passed, you know. So, yeah, in a nutshell, that's how it was. I'm just gonna take these off for a minute. I didn't even come prepared with tissues like you did.
I think it's safe to say, like, this is a person that was important to you, like a family member that you chose. Not
for
a
sure.
person that, you know, you had to have in your life, but a person that you wanted to have in your life. That
100%.
You got to have in your life.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think you learned from his friendship prior to his passing?
Um, Gosh, I should have thought about him a little more before we did this.
That's all right. Let the answers come as they may.
um,
No pressure.
well, no, it's just the emotional side. Like, I have the answers, it's just getting them out because I'm so emotional thinking about him. Like, the word that comes up in my brain is like, he was such a genuine being. Like, he would be his wild, quirky self wherever he was. Like, whoever he was with, wherever he was, he would always be that same person. And so, gosh. So that's what I learned the most about him, is that he was always the same wild, crazy person. Like, everybody who knew him obviously knew him as, like, quirky and weird, and, like, he was a scientist. So if that tells you anything, like, the dude studied bugs and loved it. So if that tells you anything, and he always spent time in nature and talking about nature, and, you know, he was like that grounded person for people.
And you've mentioned before that he had some struggles before he passed. Like, what was it like to be a friend, watching your friend struggle and I don't want to say going downhill, but having a hard time with life?
Yeah. So he moved away, got a really good job that he loved in Oregon. And when he moved there, like, throughout the years of living there, he kind of slowly digressed from communication, which, like, wasn't so surprising because he would be out, like, on the river for months at a time and not communicate with us. So for us, it was, like, kind of normal to, like, not hear from him, because he was so in with nature. He would just not have, like, he was one of those, like, nature guys who would just leave his cell phone at home and just go live on the river or work on the river or whatever he was doing, like, out in nature. And so it wasn't weird for us to not hear from him for periods of time, but then we would talk and we would have these conversations, and it would just be like, I don't know, Leanna. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't know what the future looks like. Like, it was just very grim. And so, you know, having those conversations every couple of months and not really being able to see exactly the catalyst of those feelings for him, that was really difficult for our whole friend group. Like, there was times where we would reach out to each other and be like, have you talked to Eric? You know, did he tell you this? Is he okay? Does somebody need to go check on him? You know? And there was times where, like, our friends would go out and visit him and make sure that, you know, that he was still okay. And so it didn't start not being okay until, like, the last couple years when we were like, oh, you know, shit's really bad. And so we kept trying to get him, like, every once in a while, like, somebody would, like, buy him a plane ticket to come visit in Arizona, and he would hang out here, and, you know, it'd be fine. But we really, honestly, like, for me, I didn't know that it was so severe until this last time that he came to visit. And, like, we knew he was drinking. I guess it's just, like, I hate to say this, but, like, out of sight, out of mind. Like, you're hoping that he's doing okay, like, despite, like, feelings of being down and stuff like that. And, you know, that brings in the regret if we're ever going to talk about that.
We'll get there.
Yeah. But, yeah, I think it really, the last couple of years really hit him hard. And I think we were just hoping that he would come out of it. And it's really sucks that that was my thought process, because I had been through a full-blown addiction, and I was like, I guess you really don't know until you know being on the other side of it.
Well, and at the end of the day, people with addiction, they have to be the ones to help themselves get out of it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you guys, I'm sure all of you have regrets. Like, I wish I could have, if only I'd known.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Eric he had to have been the one to, like, pull himself out of it. You couldn't have gotten
Right.
out of your addiction without being the one that was like, enough.
You know what's
And
funny is
he would have had to.
is through this whole process, like, I've kind of been the one to tell people that. I'm like you. I guess I'm like the one that has to be, maybe I'm putting this on myself because nobody told me to do it. But I feel like I'm the one who has to be okay. And talk everybody else into being okay.
You're the one with training around
Yes, yes. I do have
that.
professional
And,
training, so everybody naturally kind of asks.
well, and you teach what, like, have you ever noticed that when you're giving people advice, like, you're telling them what you need to hear at the same time?
Oh, yeah. 100%. All the time. Sometimes.
So, and who knows better than somebody else that's already going through it and has the education to kind of, like,
Yeah.
put it into words.
Yeah, but I think, like, professionally, you have, like, these buzzwords to tell people for protection, which probably isn't the right thing to say. Any professional listening to me is going to be like, no, you have to, be truthful. But you also want to make people feel okay when you're in this type of world environment, working environment. But then when you're going through it, it's completely different. Like this whole situation has thrown me for a loop, really, in my thought process. Like, I guess it's like forcing me to kind of grow in that personal aspect because I've done the professional aspect for so long.
So you're having to put these things that before were just structures and instructions, you're having to see how those measure up to real life.
Yeah.
And
It's
what do you
interesting.
think? What's your take on that?
It's very different. It's just it's different when you're sitting in it, and like I almost don't want to hear myself say those things. Like, I just want to be sad.
You know what? And that is part of grief. Like, there really is nothing you can tell another person to take their grief away or to make it any more bearable. There's nothing.
Well, and like we said in your episode, is there's no start and beginning, or there's no beginning and end to grief. It's always there. And that's, if you're going to ask me this, that's something I've realized through this process. So.
Yep. And I think, would you agree that, like, what's been the most helpful for you in grieving this friend? Like, has anybody done anything or said anything to you that was actually helpful?
The support that I have, that's been amazing.
Like, just people sitting with you in your pain?
Yeah, like, the day it happened, this is not a good coping skill. But the day it happened, I got wasted with my other friend who was a really good friend of his. And my significant other just, he made sure that I was safe, made sure I got home, made sure that if I cried, he was there. But he just kind of let me process what I needed to process that day. And I think that helped a lot, feeling that safety of just processing how I needed to, and continuing to. Like, obviously I'm not drinking about it now, but
Yeah.
just whenever the feelings come up, the people that I've had are great listeners, and helping me navigate this kind of uncharted waters with me. So that's been the best, I would say.
So, we touched a little bit about regrets, but what would you say your regrets are?
Oof. I have to breathe before this one.
Take your time.
I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, because everybody else has said this, and I've been the one to tell them that it wasn't their part. You know, this is where I feel like I don't want to hear what advice I have. But he came to visit. It was like divine intervention, because we were all in the same state at the same time, in the first time in like 10 years. And he came to visit all of us, and we hung out all together, and he stayed at my house. He actually stayed at another friend's house the night before, and then my house, and then another friend's house. And so he stayed with all of us, and I think the biggest regret is not, like, taking him to go get help, but he also didn't want it at that time. So, and he was also, like, when he was staying with us, each of us had a similar story about how he would minimize his addiction, but we knew it was there. Like, I knew that at that point when he came to stay with me, I knew he was struggling. And so I dumped out all the liquor that I had in my house to make sure that he wasn't going to drink it. But of course, he brought it anyway, you know, like, you know, I just felt like I'm going to do everything in my power not to contribute to that, you know. But I think all of us, I can speak for the whole kind of friend group, that we wish we would have just forced recovery on him, or forced upon his hand to, that sounds crazy. I know. You can't force anybody. But we all kind of have that regret, and I have that regret of not, like, saying, you are so sick right now, you're gonna die. That's regret. That's a lot of regret.
I want to tell you, based on what we just talked about in my episode, that it wouldn't have mattered if you would have said that.
Oh, no. It wouldn't have.
I cannot tell you how many times I told my parents, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die.
Yeah.
I guilted them. I cried. I wrote letters. I begged. I tried to bribe them. I tried to blackmail them. And sometimes it would work for a little while, but ultimately you cannot force somebody to change something that they don't want to change themselves.
Right. Right. And I know that in my logical, professional mind. I tell people that on a daily basis. I was telling all my friends that. But that doesn't take away that feeling. Yeah.
It's that what if, what if I had? What if I did say something? What if it did change something?
And granted, I didn't just pretend like it was not there. Like, I didn't do that either. You know, we talked about it. I asked him, like, you know, how bad is it? And he was completely honest with me. And he was that safe space when I was a teenager going through my addiction. So I wanted to give him the same safe space that he gave me in that moment.
Well, and I bet you did give him that safe space. I bet you in that moment he felt like he was safe to talk to you about it. Otherwise he wouldn't have told you the things that he told you.
Right.
So that's a gift you gave him while he was still here. A gift of loving him even though he was struggling, and holding space for him to work through his stuff even though ultimately he didn't get a chance to.
Right. Right.
But you gave that gift to him, that friendship to him, and that safe space to him while he was here.
And I wasn't the only friend. Like, all of our other friend group did that too. Which, if you're listening to this, you should all be thankful that you had that moment with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. edit, I am going to get a tissue because my nose is like running down my face.
Got it. Let me text Kimmy and tell her she can put Declan down for a nap. Alright, you ready?
Yeah. Okay.
Alright, do you want to share how he passed?
Out of respect for his family, because he, you know, it hasn't really, a whole lot hasn't been said on social media about it. I think it took us all about a month or so to, it all kind of happened around the holidays too, so that was, you know, it took us a couple months to share, but so I won't get into all the details just to out of respect for his family. But I will say that he was suffering an addiction, and that was kind of the catalyst to, you know, ultimately led to his passing. Because he was, you know, he was obviously drinking. I talked about that. And, you know, he couldn't fight it that night, you know. I don't think it was like I said, it was not intentional. He just couldn't, you know, I think it was like one of those situations where you just don't wake up. And I will share that that night before his passing, he did send us like some videos, where he was pretty intoxicated, and I believe that one of our other friends had talked to him for a while on the phone, and he was feeling pretty down, which hit that person really hard, because obviously the night before, you know. And that kind of brought me back to, like, I had talked to Anthony the day of when he committed suicide. And so it kind of brought me back to that moment, and like we said, grief doesn't have an ending, so that grieving period brought up with this grieving period was like all hell, you know. But I will say, yeah, the addiction definitely took him, and all of us are feeling this regret for not responding to any of the videos or phone calls, because they were like overnight, and we were sleeping. Nobody planned for that to happen, so yeah.
What do you think is the hardest part about someone passing so young? Because how old was he? In his 30s, right?
37, yeah. We were all born on the same year, most of us. 5 out of 7 or 8 of us were born in the same year. But anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Just fun fact. Fun friend group fact. Yeah, so he was 37, which I'm 37, and I feel like super young. So it's all perspective, right?
So what do you think is hard about somebody at that young age?
Young. Well, obviously it wasn't a planned arrangement. So, and he was getting to the point, I felt like, he had already begun to recognize his addiction was affecting him negatively. And that's like the first step to going through that healing journey in recovery, is to recognize that you have a problem. And so since he was in that recognition stage and was kind of in that, what we professionally call the pre-contemplation or the contemplation stage, which is the stage before you go into recovery. And so I felt like the universe, sorry, universe, do not spite me for this. I felt like in the moment, I felt like the universe had done him a disservice because he couldn't get to that next step of handling his addiction. Yeah.
Do you think maybe, this is going to be a taboo question, but do you think maybe he wasn't supposed to?
No, I believe that the universe and God has another plan for us. So, and that was the divine plan of whatever needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm
to be able to trust that, like, none of us know what is happening, you know, or why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the end of the day, sometimes we just have to surrender to the fact that things will happen the way they're supposed to. And that having that trust is a comfort to me.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it's a comfort to other people, you know, and maybe some people just, I really believe that some people are not meant to be here forever. And I think it makes me feel better, at least, to imagine that they knew that before they came to this earth. Like, they knew they weren't going to. And they knew that they were going to serve this purpose, whatever purpose it is, in their passing. Because, like I said in the last episode, sometimes people leaving teaches us more than them being there could ever teach us. Losing my parents taught me way more than I could ever learn from them while they were alive. Yeah. And in losing a friend, I'm sure there were some valuable lessons you learned. Do you want to touch on some of those lessons you've learned?
Yeah, I'm still working through the process, but yeah, I will. Edit. I have to plug in the laptop.
Okay. It just occurred to me, does this edit it out of the video too, or just out of the audio?
The video too.
Okay.
I do both.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So what are some lessons that you have learned from his passing? What has his passing taught you?
Well, same kind of as yours, is like people aren't going to be around forever, you know? And like, you know that. Like, you consciously know that. Like, you know death is a part of life, right? Like, but just, I guess that it kind of stems back from the beginning of when I met him. He was always like that safe space. He was always like that person that I could tell anything to. And so you just kind of feel like a person like that is going to be around forever, you know? Like, you just kind of feel like comfort in knowing that they're gonna be there. I don't know. and just really not knowing what the universe or God or however you want to refer to that is, you know, has planned for everybody. And
it made you appreciate your other friends a little more? Like, did it bring
yes, 100%. So, like, one of the goals that I set out for myself is to reach out to people more, you know, to really hone in on those friendships that I not had been neglecting per se, but had not been making a priority, you know, like.
Do you think it's easier to, I don't want to say overlook, but like maybe make smaller in the scheme of things, the things that you don't love about other people? Like, we all have things about each other that we don't love, and I'm sure that in the thick of it, Eric's addiction could sometimes be annoying. Like, I bet if you guys saw those drunk videos, some of you might have been like, oh my god, this is just sad, not knowing that that would be the last interaction you'd have with him.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, does it help you to recognize that, you know what, I still love these people despite their imperfections? Like, does it help to make things their size? Does that make sense? Like, instead of it, this thing that's
you're meeting
big,
you're meeting people
down to where it is.
I've always been a firm believer of meeting people where they're at, and I think that I learned that a long time ago and just never really put it into, like, was able to articulate it. And now that I have the job that I'm doing, I feel like that is just become second nature for me. I know for some people who are still learning that process, it's can be difficult to meet people where they're at, but that's such a prominent skill for human growth. And if you're gonna like, obviously you want to support your friends and be there for them, and so if you're doing that, if you're meeting them where they're at, then you are ultimately naturally supporting them, you know. And this also has taken me on this journey of, like, really honing into who and what makes me happy. Like, I don't want to look at his passing as, like, a selfish thing, but it kind of naturally was this catalyst to take an inventory of that in my life and really focus on what is important and who is important and who I want to put time and energy into. And so I've really been reaching out and paying attention a lot to friends that have shown me support in the past and kind of shown them support. And so I'll definitely, like, text people more or try to reach out to people I haven't seen in a while on social media. And, I'm just kind of starting there and kind of prioritizing the people portion of my life again. And that's kind of the main thing that this has all taught me, is just to reach out again and just to be present for them.
What advice would you have for either somebody who has lost a friend or somebody that has a friend who they could tell is struggling with something?
So I'm not going to give you my professional advice because, like I said, those are buzzwords. But I'm saying that because I naturally want to go there. That's my safe space when I'm
person that
dealing with grief.
It now,
yeah. I just want to, I guess I wanted to say that because other professionals, it's so much easier to go into that professional realm and speak from a professional mindset when you're talking about something uncomfortable. Because, primarily in social work and the things that I do, we are always in the discomfort, but it's other people's discomfort. And so it's very easy for us to talk from that realm. So I'm going to talk from my realm and my discomfort and tell you that it's not your fault. You are not to blame for them passing. The universe has plans for everybody in this world. Death is as much a part of this process as life is. And learn something from it. That's what I would say.
I like that.
Every event in life is a learning opportunity for growth. And that's why we do this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that we have not discussed that you would like to discuss in regards to this? Anything you're feeling called to speak about or say?
No, I think I kind of touched on everything. Obviously, I was overly emotional.
No such thing.
No such thing. Okay. Yeah, emotions are valid and normal.
If there was such a thing, I would have already done it.
No, yeah. I appreciate being vulnerable and sharing the space with everybody. And so, if anybody listening,
were honest and open about
feels,
it too.
yeah, if anybody has these over emotions that they care to share, I am a safe space to do that. I know Holly is a safe space to do that. So if you need to share emotions, we're here for it. And thank you for being the listeners and Holly for being here for me to share my this.
As a closing thought, I want to just say that I think it's important to speak about your grief, because there is comfort in that. You know what I mean? Like in letting go of some of that, and it comes out in tears or in anger or in, shaking, but letting those emotions out and processing them through conversation and in these safe spaces, I feel like is such an important part of grieving.
Absolutely.
So don't hold it in. Talk to somebody, and it doesn't matter how many times you talk to somebody about it. You can repeat yourself 100 times until you feel better about it, and it will make you feel better.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I can put some local supports and services for grief in the. We can share those with this episode, and reach out if you need anything.
Yeah. Okay. I know this is a hard episode to listen to if you're somebody that's going through some of this grief, so I want to commend you for listening to it if you are grieving, because it is hard to listen to sad stuff or process sad stuff. So if that's your experience right now, good job for facing it head on instead of running away from it. And send this to somebody who you maybe want that for.
Yes, agreed.
We
cool.
Love you.
We love you guys. I just want to put out there, if you are listening to this episode, this is one of our last episodes, or the last episode, and I just want to commend everybody for sticking it in through this second season. It's been phenomenal. Both of us have learned a lot, and stay tuned for what we have in store.
Yeah. Thanks,
cool.
Guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.
Yes.